The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode 239.
One day, I shall come back.
That's it. I've been renewed.
Is when a Time Lord's body wears out, he regenerates.
I'm a Time Lord. I'm not a human being. I walk in eternity.
Braveheart,
Change, my dear, and it seems on a moment too soon.
unlimited rice pudding.
Physician healers. Wearing a bit thin. Fantastic.
I am Scottish. I can complain about things.
Ooh. She'll be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the sixth Doctor story, Mindwarp. And joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going, Dom?
Very well, thanks. And Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, remember to follow The Secrets of Doctor Who in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, your favorite podcast app, or at the SQPN YouTube channel, where you should hit the bell to get notifications. Also want to recommend another Star Quest show you might be interested in, a new one called Let's Science. It's a bi-weekly show, which is about 20 minutes at a time, covering a really fun or interesting topic of science or two from our friends who are the Catholics of Oz from Adelaide in Australia. Melbourne? Actually, more like Melbourne, I think. Sorry, guys. Melbourne, Australia. Anyway, so check that out. Again, wherever you find podcasts or at sqpn.com/science. All right, so we're talking about Mindwarp today, and this is, just as a quick reminder, the second serial of the Trial of a Time Lord season of the Sixth Doctor. And Jimmy, can you give us a quick recap of this one?
With the Trial of a Time Lord still in progress, the Valeyard shows another of the Doctor's adventures in which he meddles in the affairs of other planets. This time, he shows us the Doctor's most recent trip, on which he took Peri to the home planet of the commerce-obsessed slug creature Syl, who we met back in Vengeance on Varos. The planet is ruled by the Grand Nagus, a slug named Lord Kiv, and he is suffering from really bad headaches that are getting worse. His brain is growing too big for his skull, and he's got a human scientist named Crozier who's doing horrible Island of Dr. Moreau experiments to find a way to transplant his brain into someone else. Crozier thinks the Doctor has crucial information and does a brain scan that addles the Doctor's mind so that he becomes, or at least appears to become, a paranoid, amoral mad scientist, and he totally betrays Peri and tortures her during interrogation. Meanwhile, the barbarian warlord King Irkanos, who is sweet on Peri and comes to regard her as his bride-to-be and future queen, tries to lead a slave rebellion against the slugs, but they aren't successful. In the end, Peri is captured, Crozier shaves her head so that she's completely bald. As things are coming to a crisis point, the Time Lords materialize the TARDIS on the planet and compel the Doctor to enter it, yanking him away for the trial. After he's gone, the Crozier then transplants Kiv's mind into Peri's head, destroying her completely and turning her into a shouting villain in the body of a human woman. Then, by the manipulation of the Time Lords, King Irkanos bursts in and kills all of them, including Peri, so that people elsewhere in the universe can't learn the secret of mind transference. And thus, Peri is given the worst fate of any Doctor Who companion ever, before or since, a death more terrifying than even Adric's. The end.
Okay. Jumping to the end, then, because I have not seen any of the Sixth Doctor after this. Is Peri really dead?
Well, in this timeline, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, this is Dark Dude, wibbly wobbly. Okay.
So, spoilers.
Yes. All right. So, because that's the thing is I don't know. Like, that's one of the problems I have with Doctor Who in general is these when people die, I don't know how to take it. Am I supposed to feel the emotional loss, or am I just going to assume a la
Clara.
Like Clara, the emotional, oh, she's dead. not really. And I'm like, it feels like a cheat. So that's where I'm like looking at Peri dying. And I'm thinking, but the doctor comes back and saves her, doesn't he? Right?
No,
he doesn't come back to save her. And and think about this now. So it's actually what? This is only the halfway point of the season.
Yeah. Well, more or less. Yeah.
More or less.
More or less.
Because we still got 2 more serials. Because we've got the third
1.5. The last one is half-length.
But,
okay.
But so they still got what? I guess so 6 weeks then. That when this was airing live, that they're like, wait, they killed her, and we still got 6 weeks left of the season. What's going on here?
Right.
Right. So.
And I assume he's going to pick up Mel at some point.
Yes. Mel comes in next episode as the companion from the future he hasn't met yet.
All right. Okay. So, man, I just liked. Okay, so Peri's dead. That we don't see Peri again in live action. Although I assume she shows up in Big Finish and other stuff.
Oh, she's all over Big Finish. Okay. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about Peri then, because I just feel like, of all the companions in Classic Who that I've seen,
Yep.
I feel like she was treated the worst by the writers.
Uh-huh.
I think she got the short end of the stick, like, really bad.
Agreed.
Because when she moved from the 5th to the 6th Doctor, he was just horrible to her the entire time. He's been terrible to her.
Well, they've gotten better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, it was obviously at its worst in the first episode where he tries to strangle her. But then it gets somewhat better to where they're just bickering constantly.
Right.
In this, by the time the Trial of a Time Lord season starts, you can see that the characters are relating to each other more warmly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's still this same kind of dynamic, but they're more at peace with each other. And there's an example of this in this episode where and I don't know if this is an acting choice or if this was in the script itself, but it shows them relating much better to each other, because the Doctor at one point is saying, sometimes I wish I'd never left Gallifrey, and Peri says, yeah, sometimes I wish that too.
Yeah.
And then he looks at her and they both just kind of smirk.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And treat it as a joke.
Right. Like, yeah, those are actually, I think, almost, I kind of feel like those are the directorial and or acting choices to kind of smooth out some of the bickering and that's been written for them. For example, Peri, some of the writing I don't like is Peri's constantly whimpering throughout these stories.
Yeah.
Like this serial, she's constantly whimpering, and the Doctor consistently ignores her worries, her desire to return to the TARDIS. And I get that they have the Time Lords at the trial bring that up. They actually, I mean, credit to them, they actually bring that up, that how he ignores her concerns and wanting to go, which they will then use against him when she dies, although it's really their fault. But
it's totally their fault. Yeah.
He probably would have saved her if they hadn't yanked him out.
Yeah. I also like how the Valeyard points out he did a spreadsheet and found out that the Doctor's companions are put in danger twice as often as the Doctor.
Right.
Well, there's twice as many of them sometimes. Oh, no.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this is kind of I would kind of, as to throw a counter, I guess, is this is kind of a flaw in Peri's character in general. You haven't seen yet, Dom, when she actually gets introduced to the TARDIS, and it's not the most flattering scene.
Okay, all right.
Where she
that's
basically
true.
half drowns herself, and
oh right, yeah, in the
Turlo
Lanzarote Planet of Fire episode, yeah.
So it's not the most flattering.
Okay. The companions, like, I mean, I've only seen part of Mel, but Mel doesn't get treated all that well either. So it's kind of.
Oh, I would much rather be Mel than be Peri. Yeah,
except
if I had to be a companion.
Well, her fate is arguably better. She doesn't die, but she does go off with Sabalum Glitz.
Well, no, I wasn't thinking of the companion's fate.
Oh,
it's
okay.
just Peri is this whining, chronically unhappy person,
right?
And Mel is not.
No. She's kind of the opposite. Yeah.
Overly bubbly.
Yeah.
And likes carrot juice, as the Doctor despises.
Yeah. But none of them are Jamie's or Sarah Jane's or Romana's
or Donna.
Well,
if we want to go to the
mean,
new Who, but yeah.
Yeah, but just sticking with the kinds of companions they had in classic Who,
right?
There were way better companions than Peri.
Yeah. I felt bad because I mean, there's something about her I want to like, but they just kept writing such bad stuff for her. Yeah. Anyway, let's rather than belabor that point. I want to mention Brian Blessed in this.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Over the top, awesome Brian Blessed at his biggest.
They talk about chewing up the scenery. Brian Blessed doesn't just chew up the scenery. He gobbles it up. He gnaws on it like a dog with an old bone. I mean, he's way beyond chewing up the scenery. He is the scenery.
Spits it out again.
Oh, I love him. He's so great.
Yeah, he's reprising his role as Prince Vultan from Flash Gordon, only even more so with weird kabuki hand gestures and hissing and trills and all kinds of stuff.
He does not hold back.
Almost expect to hear a Flash Gordon is alive.
Yeah, apparently he gave up like a major movie role to do this because he really wanted to do Doctor Who. So
that's awesome.
I give him credit for that.
One chronological note on this story is, even though he didn't have anything to do with it, it was during the production of this story that longtime Doctor Who writer Robert Holmes passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to have repercussions for how the rest of this season plays out, because he wasn't available to finish writing some of the stuff he was working on for later this series.
Right.
It also led to a huge falling out between the script editor, Eric Sayward, and Holmes's death. Led to a huge falling out between Eric Sayward and John Nathan Turner, the producer, which is going to have repercussions later in the series. Sayward, though, thought that this story, Mindwarp, was the best of the Trial of a Time Lord season, and I think I have to agree.
Mm-hmm.
This is a gloriously stupid story with bright, ridiculous colors and great heaps of overacting.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love how absolutely goofy and over the top the whole story is. And even though I can enjoy it, I totally understand why the BBC might want to cancel the series at this point in its development. If you're watching this from the perspective of a non-fan and as a BBC executive, you could easily say this is something we don't want on our airwaves.
Yeah,
right.
Well, it's interesting though, because we watch this and then we watch, for Secrets of Star Trek, we watch a TNG episode that was aired just a year later.
Right.
And the comparison between the two of them, which were contemporary television broadcast sci-fi, is so night and day. It's so night and day.
You literally read my mind there. Maybe you did. Because I was just about to make that point, is comparing this to other sci-fi of that era and just the quality. I mean, the writing, there was worse sci-fi writing at the time. I mean, that there was some bad ones. But just the
Star Cops.
Yeah, right.
Some
but the
TNG episodes.
Yeah, some TNG, you're right. But the production quality, the acting, that sort of stuff was really vastly different. This was more like Saturday morning kids productions.
Well, because this has its origins as a kids show.
Right.
It's meant to be all family viewing for tea time on Saturdays. Whereas Star Trek The Next Generation, although it was meant to be accessible to kids, was not aimed at kids, but at adults.
Right.
Well, I think there's also an aspect of the BBC, they got lazy with it. They never really funded it to the extent that they could have or maybe should have, but they really were riding on the laurels of the past of Doctor Who at this point. And it was, because again, we are within, there was thought that at the end of the season they would cancel it. And then we are within just a couple of seasons of them finally putting it on hiatus until 2005.
Yeah.
They're actually, in this season, they know that they're in danger of cancellation because they just come out of the 18-month hiatus, and that's why they decided to do this metafictional Trial of a Time Lord season, because they knew the series itself is on trial. So they're trying here, but I just think they don't have the right people and funding to pull off a complete tonal change in the series. I don't think they were trying for a complete tonal change.
Right. Yeah, speaking of Saturday morning kids, they were attacked by HR Puff and stuff at the beginning there in that cave. Did you notice the creature? It looked a little bit like that. One of the things, when you talk about like the falling up between Eric Sayward and Nathan Turner.
John Nathan Turner.
I could say that. That actually affected this episode. I was reading when Colin Baker was trying to figure out at one point, am I really turned? Am I really a traitor? Is it a ploy? What's going on? He couldn't get a straight answer from anyone. He'd go to Sayward and he'd say, go ask Turner. You go to Turner, go ask Sayward. Like he's asking, like nobody could tell him.
And the original scriptwriter,
right?
Who wasn't either of those guys, and nobody knew what was going on. I remember the first time I watched this years ago, and it's like, wow, the Doctor is evil in this, like for reals. Yeah. And I didn't buy his trial excuse of this is all some ploy because they don't really pay that off.
Oh, right.
And the Doctor admits he has no memory of this at first. And then when he starts getting his memory back, it's like, yeah, this is what happened, but the emphasis is all wrong. And so, maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle there, but I don't know. They don't clearly establish that the Doctor has not been turned evil by this.
Yeah.
And my headcanon is no, he really gets rattled.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Doctor, like claiming when he's in the dock, claiming it's a ploy, felt like, I don't know what's really going on, but it must be. Like I couldn't possibly have turned because he doesn't remember. That's what it felt like.
Well, in the Matrix, of course, the Matrix doesn't lie, just like Vulcans don't lie. And of course, we find out later that, the Matrix can be influenced.
I kept wanting them to go, wait, guys, you've just acknowledged last episode that the Matrix can be altered.
Right.
I mean, that's because Earth was out 2 light years out of place or whatever. And so obviously the Matrix can be altered. Why aren't you raising that point?
Right. And the fact is like when you talk about the Matrix doesn't lie, but he says the emphasis is all wrong, and it's sort of something we talk about today, which is a picture or even a video doesn't necessarily tell the whole story because it only captures one aspect, one limited amount of time or one angle of the picture, or you know what I mean? It's like taken out of context, and so I get that. The other thing is the whole Earth, the Doctor at the beginning of this episode keeps wanting to go back to, hey, wait a minute, we skipped over a very important thing, that Earth was out of place by 2 light years. So you guys are wanting to ignore this. Let's go back to that. And they're like, nope, we're going on. We're moving. And I mean, it's very suspicious. Let's just say. So there's clearly they're building up to something nefarious is happening here. I did like at the very beginning of this episode. I don't want to miss that because I want to make a point of it. That very first scene where the Doctor and the Valiant are kind of verbally sparring again, and the Inquisitor comes in and smacks them both down, which is a lot of fun. Like the Doctor calls the Valiant on being a sycophant with the Inquisitor, and
because he calls her sagacity, which is not a recognized legal title on Gallifrey.
Right. And then she tells him to stop calling you the Valiant, the barnyard, the axe yard, and all these other things.
So speaking of the yard, I've been keeping account. So in Mysterious Planet, the Doctor called the Valiant the boatyard, the graveyard, the farmyard, the scrapyard, and he didn't quite call him the knacker's yard, but that came up too. In this episode, because of the smackdown that Madam Inquisitor puts on the Doctor, he only gets out Brickyard, and she then names a few others, but of what he is not to call the Valiant. The only new one though is the backyard, which would be an American expression because in England, I gather what we call the backyard they call the garden.
Right, the back garden or the garden, or any other kind of yard, which was fun. So we haven't seen what leads up to this adventure, which is regarding the warlords. The Doctor and Peri are talking about these warlords that they'd run into who had deadly beam weapons that came from the planet that they're now on, the Sills planet. And so the Doctor says that, he want to stop advanced civilizations from meddling in less developed ones, which is interesting considering what he's on trial for, which is exactly that, meddling in less advanced civilizations. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that's just the excuse to get the story started.
Yeah.
They need some reason to be on this planet, and okay, we're tracking down a weapon supply.
Right. They get these phaser boxes things. So Yurkanos ends up helping them escape. They get captured. They're in Crozier's lab. Crozier's yet another mad scientist figure. We've seen a lot of those.
Yeah, another really emotionless mad scientist in this case. He doesn't care about anything.
Right. Completely immoral. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the one we just talked about in the Fourth Doctor story, where we met the Sisterhood of Karn, and
Morbius at least though was like over the top emotional.
Yeah,
right.
And I mean, he was totally amoral, but he was fun. This guy is like ice, by comparison.
Yeah, there's basically those two kinds of the two kinds of mad scientists. Either the ones who are like always crazy, or the other ones who are just completely emotionless, and I am very serious scientist.
Yeah, and for someone in the future, there is a really interesting mad scientist writing/acting choice that's in the middle of those.
Mm-hmm.
Where you have a mad scientist who seems totally normal, but they're just doing mad scientist things.
Mm-hmm.
By way of comparison, whenever anybody is like possessed in one of these shows by an alien or something, they either they tend to behave really over the top in some way, or they tend to just become completely emotionless.
Yeah.
And there's actually a fascinating middle that they do on Deep Space Nine. I think it's in The Reckoning, but Keiko O'Brien gets possessed by one of the Pa Wraiths.
Mm-hmm.
And she is totally normal, except for the fact she's a Pa Wraith.
Right.
And so she's like, Miles, you're not going to let me eat all of this box of chocolates, are you? Come on.
Yeah.
And okay, Miles, I guess I'm going to have to stop Keiko's heart now.
Yeah.
Which makes it even creepier. Yeah.
Yeah. And having that be totally normal is just breaks the trope of either the over-the-top shouting villain or the icy emotionless possessed person, and having someone who's normal is like even harder to deal with and therefore more interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Speaking of Crozier, there is a moment where the Doctor has escaped, and he's got this need to find out if the creature, the HR Pufnstuf creature, really did attack the Doctor, because everyone keeps saying it couldn't have attacked you. It's very peaceful, and because Crozier's doing these mutations and has genetically altered the rock, it's called, and
RAAK, not the guy who's like the mixed martial arts champ,
right? And they keep saying we have to recapture the Doctor so that we can figure out whether the rock really attacked. And I'm thinking, assume it did. Move on. Like, why is this such a huge plot point that we have to recapture the Doctor? Otherwise, there's no way to tell whether this thing is gone loopy or not. And I just okay.
And they do play out why it's such a concern is after they do the transfer of Kiv to that other slug, the brown slug creature instead of the green slug creature.
Yeah.
They say that the host cells are taking over the brain of Kiv. That's why he's suddenly all of a sudden interested in fish and smelling fish and wants fish, because he came from a fisherman. The body came from a fisherman. And they're so concerned at the beginning of the story about did this creature attack the Doctor and Peri, and then they just throw this one line in and that's it.
Yeah.
So they play it out, but they play out in such a quiet, quick way that it's like, oh, okay, that's why this was such a big deal in the beginning, because they're worried about if they put Kiv's brain in another body, is that other body going to take over Kiv?
Right. So the rock was a sea creature that they then upgraded to be able to perform slave labor for them, and they're concerned that that over time the techniques they use to uplift the rock may revert, and so its base nature can reassert itself, and they don't want that to happen to Lord Kiv into whatever body they put him in. And they do put him into another. So the race that Syl and Kiv belong to, the slug-like race, they're called the Mentors.
Yep.
And I guess they do lots of work with kids at summer camp or something to have earned that title. But the Mentors they apparently come in more than one color. All of the ones we see are green, except for this one that's brown that has died, and it was a fisherman. And so before they put Kiv's mind into Peri, they put Kiv's brain into this dead mentor. So you got a little Frankenstein action going on here. And we've also got Chekhov's stinger on the mantelpiece because they make a point of this brown body that they put Kiv into, the brown slug body, apparently the mentors are a race with a lot of mutations, which is why Kiv's brain is outgrowing his skull, because he's a mutation, and that's one of the things that's happening with him. But this brown mentor has its primordial stinger at the end of its slug body, so it could sting people and poison them. And then they never do anything with that.
Right.
It's like, come on, you know the rule. You show me the stinger, you got to use it.
Exactly.
Right. I kept waiting for that. There is a moment where Peri has to explain to Erkanos about where she's from. She's from Earth. And she describes Earth as lots of madmen playing at warriors and actors playing over the top in politics, which is a super 1986 specific reference to the Cold War and Ronald Reagan. I thought that was a very interesting decision there to make it, because Peri is being played as American. She's
right.
Even the actress is British. I noticed in some of the online materials that there are scenes cut, most specifically scenes from the trial.
Yeah, good riddance.
Now, were those aired originally? Like, what happened to those? Or because they're not in the BritBox version I've been watching. Do you guys know what happened to those deleted scenes?
I don't know anything in particular. I mean, there was already enough scenes from the trial, especially the very beginning, where they'd show like one little scene and immediately switch to the trial and then back to another scene and back to the trial. I mean, it was
yeah.
And the way that this was all written, the scripts for the base story were written first, and then the trial scenes were written by a different person to overlay on top of that. And they may have deliberately filmed additional material because they didn't know how it would all cut together.
Right.
Okay.
And they may have wanted additional options. That I don't know. What I do know is the trial is very uninteresting to me because all it is bickering. And I don't know why this is, but I've been watching a number of shows lately where people are being put on trial, and why does everyone want to go pro per? Why do they all want to defend themselves instead of having a lawyer? And they always point out it's stupid to do this, but then they do it anyway. And I just do not. I mean, I understand that the writers think it's going to be more dramatic if the hero is speaking for himself, but it is just such a cliched trope to have people representing themselves. The legal term for that, the slang term, is pro per. It's short for in propria persona, which in Latin means in one's own person or on one's own behalf. And I don't think they see I understand the writers need to create drama and conflict, but I think they're missing the opportunity to have drama and conflict arising from between the main character who's on trial and his legal counsel. Because there's a lot of interesting stuff you could play out there where, if the doctor had a counselor that was representing him, let's think about what drama we could get from that. I mean, obviously we can have squabbling, because, that's all he's doing with the Valiant anyway, is squabbling. He may as well squabble with his own counsel. At least I'd give him a second person to squabble with. But assuming the doctor does not know everything about Gallifreyan law, which he obviously doesn't here, he could become dependent on his counsel for, there can come a point where he can realize his life is on the line based on his counsel. Is his counsel really competent or not? Is his counsel really on his side or not? There's all kinds of interesting things you could do there.
Right. I mean, in this, he says, you know, I want to defend myself because I don't trust any Time Lord to defend me. So he comes right out and says it. But yeah, you're right. It would be more interesting to have. I mean, like in the Star Trek one we discussed recently, the original series where Kirk was on trial in a court martial, and they gave us a character, you know, of a lawyer,
Samuel T. Cogley,
right, and that could have been an interesting addition without losing the Doctor as the main character. I mean, there could still be interaction between the lawyer and the Doctor could interject and be told by his counsel to sit down. You know, those standard things like that. But yeah, otherwise it's just the Doctor bickering with the Valeyard.
And just like on Star Trek, the Gallifreyan Samuel T. Cogley can get up at the end and make a big emotional and legally unpersuasive speech and save the day.
And just remember too, there's a phrase out there about he who is his own counsel has a fool for a client.
Right, that's right.
And it shows time and time again in these shows.
Yeah. So there's some interesting interactions between Peri and Irkonos when they're on the run from the Doctor and the Mentors. At one point, she doubts the reality of destiny, and Irkonos freaks out because, you know, life would be meaningless without destiny. He's also apparently his culture, death is something to be embraced because that's when you ultimately enter into Valhalla of a sort.
Well, so he's got this really Klingon ideology.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about this guy in terms of Next Gen, this guy's a Klingon, a really weird Klingon,
right.
But he's a Klingon. He even says that this is a great day to die.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so they've got this battle ethic. And he says on his planet, when you die, your souls get reborn. So they believe in reincarnation, but you move up this ladder where you become king, which is where he is. And then in his next life, he is going to get to go to Valhalla, where he'll be with other kings and they'll fight gloriously in battle and apparently never die or something.
Right. They also don't have the concept of love. The Peri has to explain to Irkonos and Durf the dog boy what love is and so forth, which is kind of odd.
Yeah, that was just dumb.
Yeah, well, because Irkonos has already sort of expressed affection for Peri, right?
Expressed affection. He's picked her as his queen.
Right, exactly. So
it must be her natural beauty and those amazing pumps that she's wearing with the 3-inch heels stiletto heels running around these caverns.
That's right. Those caverns must have very level
like,
floors.
Peri, how long have you been with the Doctor? Practical shoes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Get some flats, some tennis shoes.
Well, you know, it only took the Doctor 10 regenerations before he finally figured out that, you know, Converse are much more comfortable than like leather shoes.
Right. So you mentioned, Jimmy, that the Time Lords pull the Doctor out of time before he can save Peri. And they say, well, you've set in motion events that would change time forever. And I'm thinking, so then why not let him fix it? Like, why did you pull him out so he couldn't fix it? And
yeah.
And they are the MacGuffin. I don't know what it's not a MacGuffin, but the justification is, well, Crozier, you helped him perfect his technique that would cause immortality to spread among the universe and everyone would be immortal forever. And I'm thinking, wouldn't Crozier, like, I don't think the Doctor actually helped him all that much. He eventually would have perfected it, I would think, this technique. I mean,
well, but if he wouldn't have perfected it for Lord Kiv, he would have been killed by Lord Kiv's bodyguard, and he wouldn't have been able to have the opportunity to perfect it.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Okay.
So we should probably explain that a little bit more. So initially in this story, they're doing a Frankenstein bit about literally transferring Lord Kiv's brain into a new skull that has more growth room for his brain. And that makes sense when they find the brown slug guy that they put him in. And they say it's only temporary. It's just, this is going to be a temporary thing. We got to find a better long-term home for you because this guy's brain pan is only a little bit bigger. So it'll let your brain grow for a while, but we're going to need a more permanent solution. And then now Peri's head is obviously smaller than the giant, polystyrene monster head that they've made for the male actor playing Kiv and the Brown Slug. And so it had been a while since I'd watched this, and I was thinking, okay, so how are they going to justify, or are they going to justify how his brain fits into Peri's obviously much smaller skull? And the way they do it is they shift. It's no longer a brain transference, it's a mind transference.
Right.
So they're just downloading his personality into Peri and overwriting her native personality.
Yep.
And that's the immortality thing, that anybody from here on out, Crozier says, we can just do this with anybody, and so nobody would have to die, and it really would, except all the people you're overwriting, obviously. Correct. But then they don't count. And obviously that would be a concern to Time Lords. I mean, they have themselves the 12 regeneration limit at this point, and so they have an ideology that says nobody should be completely immortal, even if you live a long time, and especially a kind of immortality where you're overwriting people. Yeah. Now, this wouldn't, from a faith perspective, this is just playing with someone's memory. This is not real immortality.
Mm-hmm.
You're just effectively hypnotizing someone into thinking they're someone else, but they're really not.
Mm-hmm.
And the real person does die when their brain stops working. But this would be something that I could see the Time Lords intervening to stop, but the way they do it is horrifying.
Right.
I mean, yanking the Doctor out in this way, and then they deliberately stall Urkanos in a time bubble to allow everything to be just right in the operating theater for Urkanos to burst in and shoot everybody dead.
Yep.
So it's really cold and horrifying the way they do it. Also, in terms of thinking through the logic of this, I wouldn't worry about that too much, because as the Doctor himself has been shouting, there's something else going on here.
Mm-hmm.
There's a secret agenda, and
Right.
so some of this doesn't make sense, and they haven't revealed what the secret agenda is yet.
Okay. Yeah, the whole time Urkanos in the time bubble, like, why I also didn't get why making him wait and bursting in and shooting was better than just letting him burst in and shoot before it happens.
And especially since they said that the reason why they pulled the Doctor out when he did is he couldn't get there in time anyways. He wouldn't have been able to reach the room to stop the transference to Peri in the first place. So let's just yank him out here, but then we're not going to get Urkanos there in time to shoot the machine so it doesn't happen.
Right. So, like you said, Jimmy, that maybe that has to do with the overall subplot, the subtext of all this that the Time Lords are doing to manipulate things. So the Doctor may or may not be clued in on that. So we end this with another dead companion, which is somewhat distressing. And
I love the way she goes out, though. I mean, becoming a horrible shouting villain and then being shot dead by her former boyfriend, sort of.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's one way to go. I mean, it's not quite the heroic end of Adric, but
well, it's a lot better than going off with Sabalam Glitz. Yeah.
That's certainly true. It's certainly true. Oh man. Anything else left to say about this, Father Cory?
Nothing here.
Jimmy?
So we didn't really talk much about Syl in this episode.
Ugh.
But, he was popular enough as a villain in Vengeance at Pharos that they wanted to bring him back, and they've toned him down a little here.
They did.
He's not making as many of the weird noises that the actor made the first time.
Yeah.
But I do like how he is... I like how he greets the Doctor just very cordially, oh, Doctor, such a pleasure to meet you, and your revoltingly ugly assistant.
Yes.
and then later on, the Doctor mentions Peri in front of him, and he's like, oh, the revolting one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And then when Crozier reveals he's going to put Kiv's mind into Peri's body, Syl is disappointed that that his lord is going to go into such an ugly body.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So we really didn't talk much about Dorf.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Dorf is an assistant, and they use actually a fancy royal title for him. The title is not itself royal, but it's the kind of it's a person who assists royalty
Mm-hmm.
with certain things. And it's like an old British title. You don't hear it a lot. But he was then, by Crozier, turned into a wolf man. But he's not like, he doesn't shift back and forth. He's permanently half man, half wolf.
He's his own best friend.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, he's certainly not shown much love by anybody else in the series. But I like the actor's choice. So they've given the actor these huge canines as a mouth prosthesis, and he spends a lot of the time with his mouth just open to make it look like he's like a wolf who's about to bite, and he just walks around like that a lot, even though real wolves don't do that. But I thought that was an interesting, effective acting choice to remind us he's a wolf man, because the most wolf-like thing about him is the teeth.
Yeah.
I mean, he looks much more wolf-like if he keeps his mouth open than not. Since this is taking place in caves anyway, it's dimly lit. And he's harder to see and harder to see the details of. So that was, I thought, an effective choice on his part. I also, as I mentioned, I just love Irkanos, Brian Blessed's performance as Irkanos, and how over the top it is. Shortly after the Doctor has had his brain addled by the brain scan, Irkanos, they've escaped, and Irkanos is saying to the Doctor how they're going to counterattack, and he's saying, "We'll pile the heads of our enemies before us like melons in a heap." And the Doctor is like, "Oh, yeah."
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the mind warp part of it, is the Doctor has his brain kind of scrambled by Crozier, and that's why we are, the reason we're given for why he acts the way he does the rest of the story, that addling.
Oh, one other thing. Thoros Beta, so they're on Thoros Beta in the late 24th century, and so they're all, I guess, are contemporary with Star Trek Next Generation.
Yeah.
And Thoros Beta is a planet that apparently has had a near-fatal encounter with a Quantel paint box. This was a program that was used back in the 1980s to adjust color in video, and wow, have they adjusted the colors on the exterior shots of Thoros Beta. It is totally trippy, man.
Yeah.
But I like it. I like that they're trying. I mean, it's not really believable, but I like that they're doing that, and they're showing me something other than the inside of a quarry.
Yeah.
Now I've got a beach that looks like you're on magic mushrooms or something.
Exactly. Yes, that is true. One thing I was amused by was at one point, Crozier in his lab, his assistant tells him that Kiv is undergoing cardiac arrest while Crozier's drinking his tea, and he continues to like sip his tea.
Yeah.
Like, oh yes, yeah. the emotionalist mad scientist bit. Yeah, that was good. That was one thing I had in my notes that I wanted to mention. I think that about does it then. The mind warp. Yeah, we'll see where we go. Again, I'm a little disappointed about Peri's end here, but we'll see with the rest.
Well, I
of the
thought
season.
it was a great ending as long as they would leave it alone. But
yeah,
they don't leave it alone.
No, they don't.
Okay, all right.
Peri does not come back into the series, but they do take the sting out of this a little bit.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll have to wait and see. All right, we want to take a moment as we finish up to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Doctor Who, including Danny L., Joshua G., Father Michael G., Frank V., and Gray B. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And we'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edits the show for us every week. So that's it from us. What did you think of the Sixth Doctor story, Mind Warp? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or send an email to drwho@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the 11th Doctor story, A Town Called Mercy.
Oh.
I'm just
you
waiting
have
for
no
that.
mercy, Dom.
No
And
mercy.
I thought I lucked out by missing dinosaurs.
Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Doctor Who.
Dom, you cannot run from the sins of your past.
Or the future, in this case. Father Cory Sticha, thank you as well.
Thank you, Dom.
And you're not sure. And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, gentlemen, may I remind you, this is a court of law, not a debating society for maladjusted psychotic sociopaths.
Right. This is gonna be fun.
That's our new tagline for the show.